My name is Susan Hughes, and I'm interviewing Miss Nettles Brown. She's a third grade teacher at Dr. N.H. Jones, which is a magnet school here in Ocala, Florida. Um, how long have you been teaching?
I've been teaching for 7, 8 years. 8 years.
And was it all in Marion County, or was it in other places too?
First 2 years were in Escambia County, and the remaining has been in Marion County.
Okay. And was it all like third grade or?
Elementary. I've done second, third, and fourth.
Okay. And what made you want to get into teaching?
Love of children, the desire to excite and give the knowledge to them.
Okay.
That's been the biggest thing, and the fact that I could be the biggest kid of all.
That's good. I like that. I can see that too. I've worked with you a little bit, so.
I was just telling a parent a minute ago, it's the biggest joy to be able to come and just share your excitement and get them excited as you are about learning.
Yes. Okay. As far as, I'm just curious, I know that you work with other third grade teachers,
yes.
like here in the Dr. N.H. Jones. You collaborate with them, and I've seen, you talk with them and so forth. In order to best serve your students that have disabilities and so forth, how do you communicate and work with other professionals in working with those kind of children?
I feel like we have to communicate really what are some of the expectations I have in class or what I'm seeing in class that could help the professional also help service that child. There may be things that they see or things that I see that we may have in different experiences, but if we communicate those things to each other, and also it may help us with planning lessons. If they notice something that I didn't notice through that interaction because it's a different environment sometimes, like if it's pull out or if it's inclusion, you may notice something different in your environment than I do. So the communication has to be clear and concise.
Okay, thank you. And then as far as working with professionals who are in the ESE field, such as maybe the speech teacher, language teacher, or other special ed teachers.
Pardon the interruption. Patricia, could you please call the front office? Patricia, could you please call the front office?
Disregard the announcement, please. Thank you.
That's just an example of how teachers have to be very flexible.
Absolutely.
When they're working. So, working with ESE professionals. So what are the ESE professionals that you work with in this school?
Well, currently in the school I work with you, Mrs. Hughes. However, I don't have as any ESE related students, but I also work with not this year. Prior to this year, I've worked with the speech and language teacher that's come into our classrooms. Other than that, prior to our school, I've worked with several ESE inclusion resource teachers that have come in my classroom and outside of ESE, ELL, Paris.
Right. And what do you feel is, in working with those professionals, what was really important in communicating with them?
Well, the biggest thing I noticed was just kind of our day-to-day operations and what we expected of each other. As far as lesson planning, if there were, especially with the inclusion teacher, I think that was the biggest communication part I saw, that we were on the same page, that I understood what services she needed to provide for the student, and that if I had activities, that she knew kind of where to go with those activities for my directions, but also what she needed me to do for her. That was the biggest thing, and it was all for that child, not necessarily for our benefit, but for benefiting that child.
Yes, that's very important. For the child, makes me think of child-centered kind of focus in communicating.
Not as much about us and our personal or professional idea of what it should be, but what was the best interest of that child.
And now, the most effective way to work with others, just in general, what do you feel like?
It's really proactivity. Proactivity with communicating schedule changes. I think that's one thing that I've tried to do. If I notice that my schedule is changing or we're not going to be here or something's changing, but also, like I said earlier, just communicating what we notice and what we observe with that student. If there's something that's changed, it may be something that within my classroom, maybe something happened at home that when that child comes to that ESC teacher, I can share that information,
Yeah.
and that would help understand that the child's behavior that day, or the lack thereof of participation in the activity.
Okay, that's interesting. I've noticed that too. It's like so important to understand their home background as well as what's going on in their personal life and their school and in all areas of school too. Have you ever had a specific problem that you had to work out with like other professionals that you felt like there was something like not a problem, but maybe like there was just an issue where there needed to be a way of communicating with each other that was solved that you could think of? Or
I think one of the, and I think this is a challenge in communication in education. Period. Is really understanding the roles of each other.
yeah,
I feel like sometimes in the past, especially when I had more of an inclusion teacher, although she was an inclusion teacher, she had a primary responsibility.
right,
And I think sometimes that gets convoluted with you're my assistant when it's not that they're there for a specific purpose.
right,
And so I feel like sometimes conflict can come from maybe my not misunderstanding her role. It's very important that I understand his or her role when they're in there, and that they're there to provide certain services and not necessarily to be my backup.
right,
I think that's one of the biggest things. When you have pullout, I think the biggest communication issue there is timing and scheduling. And especially with our classroom dynamics changing so much, that may be an inconvenience to the pull-out teacher when they're having to come in and service the child, and the teacher has testing and whatever going on. I think that poses a lot more of the challenge with the services to me. So the communication has to be clear and proactive.
right. Yeah.
Proactivity is the key.
Yes, proactivity is very important. In some of the classes I've been taking and things I'm learning, you can actually use technology to communicate with other teachers. How have you used technology to communicate with other professionals, other teachers, just as a general,
Oh my goodness, it's been the lifesaver of my teaching profession. Actually, it was just funny yesterday. I swear I may have emailed them 10 times within 15 minutes, just different various communications. Email communication to me is one of the best ways to communicate with other teachers because we all are limited in time. And so for what I could spend 15 minutes trying to communicate to them through going to visit, I can email in like 2 seconds and they can still get the point across, and we can have that dialogue and pull in more teachers when they have the convenient time to do so. It opens up a window of not just communication right then and there, but they may check their emails at 7 o'clock at night and respond back to me, so I can get more real time feedback.
Okay.
Also, we use a program called Class. I use a program for just equal parents, Class Dojo, and oh my goodness, the amount of communication that I have with my parents has tripled since just using paper newsletters or what have you. I'm getting real time, dual communication and feedback. So I think technology has been a great implementation into the classroom as far as teachers.
Okay. And did you have anything that you feel that's important? Like I've asked you a lot of questions about communication and things like that. Do you have anything that you really feel is important in communicating with other professionals related with children with disabilities that maybe you wanted to add?
The biggest thing I feel is that we have to remember why we're there. And then we have to understand we may not understand each other's roles. The key is to try to understand the other person's role more. That to me seems to be one of the biggest things. The challenges that an ESC teacher has to go through, I may not have the background knowledge or the expertise, and maybe sharing those resources with each other can also help there. That's one thing I've noticed. I know, for the record, with you in the past, you've provided me with resources that I can utilize in the classroom for students that have had difficulties. And I've been able to talk to you many times about students that have had handwriting issues, spelling issues, issues with staying on task. And that's been great to help me improve in the classroom.
Right. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay.
No problem.